Right. So the other day, I wrote a piece following up on the factional Starmerite goings on up in Broxtowe in Nottinghamshire, that due to Starmer imposing a candidate instead of letting locals select their popular socialist councillor, Greg Marshall, to stand in the seat for Parliament, it resulted in the entire Broxtowe Labour executive quitting. And the piece I did the other day was a kind of 6 months later to that, to see what state Labour was in there now, bearing in mind Broxtowe had become famous throughout the country for their incredibly successful community organising and service to the people there, making them an intrinsic part of Broxtowe life, not just showing up every 5 years looking for votes, as the party does so many other parts of the country. But 6 months on, Starmer's destroyed that, with the CLP still inoperable because members refused to run it in solidarity with those driven away, and Starmer seized access to the community hub bank accounts as well. So the Labour Party can no longer run the services that contribute to the community and have made them such an intrinsic part of Broxtowe life. They can't even pay the rent on their own Labour Party shop anymore, and it's closing. You have to look at an incident like that and think to yourself, the authoritarianism on show there is bonkers. The damage caused to the party itself, so unnecessary. And what will that say for the country if Starmer ends up running it? If he can't run a corner of the country in Nottinghamshire like Broxtowe, that he's willing to destroy his own party there, what's he going to do to the country? Should also make you look at Labour's poll lead with a large pinch of salt, given the party relies on members to get the vote out. Members that in Broxtowe certainly, and in other parts of the country as well, have either left the party or will not bother to put in the effort, with nothing but continuity Tory policy on show in return from the current leadership. Now, Broxtowe, some of you might be thinking, might be an extreme example. A solidly left CLP as they are, showing solidarity with each other against the diktat being handed down by its own party leadership. But it's not an isolated incident, it seems. And as much as Broxtowe is the product of Starmeroids parachuting in preferred candidates, the other example that has just come to light shows a much more worrying trend. We're back to Uxbridge and South Ruislip, scene of the recent by-election that was supposedly Labour's to lose. And they lost it. Now, I did a post-by-election analysis video on that. I'm not going to go into the minutiae of that again here. But just as in Broxtowe, where locals stood down and are not currently involved in Labour goings-on and campaigning there, in Uxbridge, the local CLP were frozen out by the control freakery that seems to define London Labour these days. I was on social media looking about and seeing accusations being thrown at the CLP chair of Uxbridge Labour still just today, being blamed for the loss of that by-election. The truth is, though, the entire CLP, including that chair, now former chair, Davy Williams, were frozen out entirely from the election process during that by-election because, well, they picked a local chap, Connor Liberty, to stand for them. Liberty won 6 out of 7 local branch selections, yet the guy who won that single other branch selection, Danny Beales, not local, but from Starmer's own CLP in Holborn and St Pancras, very much his sort, as all parachute candidates in seem to be, got picked instead. Liberty was too young, apparently, you see, despite only being 4 years younger than the Wes Streeting clone that just won Selby and Ainsty in Yorkshire. Well, Davy Williams had been planning to stand down for months ahead of this. He did so after the election, though, waiting until then so as to not damage the party's chances in that by-election. And following that, Starmer has now seized control of the entire CLP in Uxbridge now too, much as he has in Broxtowe. He can't get anyone to run the CLP there, up in Nottinghamshire, but in Uxbridge, London Labour have imposed themselves as the interim officers. So even if nobody will run the CLP locally, London Labour are happy to do so remotely, all on the basis that it is somehow the CLP's fault that Labour lost Uxbridge, despite having been frozen out of the process and nothing at all to do with London Labour, who in fact are responsible ultimately for that loss. Now, I can already hear some people squealing it was Sadiq Khan and Ulez that lost it, but it wasn't. Ulez actually remains popular because people want clean air and they get it. They just don't want to be impoverished further during a cost of living crisis in order to deliver it, which Khan is unfortunately overseeing, the Tory government not providing the funding to deliver it, despite Ulez originally being their idea. Playing politics, it's called. They're very fond of calling it out, the Tories. They're not so fond to have admitted to doing it themselves. Anyway, forget Ulez. It wasn't what lost it. Just as we've seen in Broxtowe, when you upset local Labour members, they down tools. Local councillors, again, were forced out to campaign on pain of being deselected themselves instead, a familiar tactic by now under the Starmer regime, because you can't force volunteers to volunteer. just because you say so. And you can't guilt trip them into it either when you treat them like dirt, as the current Labour leadership are. Nor can you force them to campaign for non-existent policies or policy positions that change like the wind as Starmer flip-flops from one populist position to another, nor when the things he does commit to, for 5 minutes at least, are the same as what the Tories have been doing or planning to do as well. You will fail. Of course, London Labour cannot just come out, blame a by-election loss on the local CLP and use that as the pretext to take over. No, no, no. They need a better reason than that to not just direct the local CLP to choose new officers, which may have had only limited success, or none at all, as Labour's authoritarian ineptness has shown in Broxtowe. But here in Uxbridge, where boundary changes are happening, that is being used as the excuse. However, it is funny that no other London constituency Labour parties are having their executives imposed by London Labour to oversee the same administration, isn't it? Even if boundary changes are happening with them too. What makes Uxbridge and South Ruislip so special then? Well, I just cannot imagine. At any rate, the now former Uxbridge chair, Davy Williams, sent out an email to all local members explaining that basically not only was he going, but the London Labour had actually dismissed the entire executive in Uxbridge and South Ruislip CLP and just imposed themselves. And his email reads, "Dear fellow members of Uxbridge and South Ruislip CLP, by now you should have received an email from the London Labour Party informing you that they have appointed themselves as the new interim officers of the Uxbridge and South Ruislip Constituency Labour Party. Due to the boundary changes, the current CLP is deemed to be substantially changing with the addition of Harefield and Ickenham, wards from Ruislip, North and Pinner. That means London Region have removed all current EC officers from our posts, temporarily dissolved the EC and appointed themselves as the EC officers. I have sought further clarification of the next steps, but at this time I can only confirm that London Region will be in contact to arrange an AGM for the new constituency sometime in the autumn, post-party conference. Until then, the CLP is in effect temporarily dissolved. Some of you will be aware we had intended inviting the Harefield and Ickenham members to our September and October meetings so we could get to know each other prior to any AGM, which really should be held face-to-face in person for full transparency. It is our hope London Region carry out this proposal. In the meantime, on behalf of the EC officers, I would like to thank you for your support, and we look forward to working with you all again in the future." Now, this creates all manner of potential problems. CLP officers, for those not familiar, I used to be one when Labour was still worth being a member of. You get the chair, you get two vice chairs, one of which has access to local membership. You have representatives or officers on that executive with disability, such as I was as an unpaid carer. I have experience in that. You get other officers for BAME, a youth officer, a women's officer. So you can imagine an old man being the youth officer. Well, that would be completely against the rules and silly. How about a white woman for BAME? Again, ridiculous. Or a man for women's officer. Daft. You get it. Yeah, this is apparently what is going on, according to local members in Uxbridge and South Ruislip now. The London Labour Interim Appointment Officer for Women and BAME and Disability are apparently all held by the same person in London Labour, and that person apparently happens to be a white man. CLP is being abused like this. They won't win. London Labour can impose all the diktat they like at local meetings right now. Members simply won't go. You can't force them to attend. You can't force them to attend a meeting or listen to you or do as you instruct when they are members voluntarily and play their parts and give their time all voluntarily. Perhaps in Uxbridge there will be right-wingers who will establish a new CLP, unlike Broxtowe. I'm sure that's what London Labour would like to see. But you will see membership collapse in return, because it happened under Blair before, when this all happened in the party, and it has been happening and will continue to happen under Blair on steroids, Keir Starmer. No polling reflects any of this. Uxbridge was supposed to be a sure thing in the recent by-election, and it wasn't. And Starmer's team lost it. And Starmer's response, or London Labour's response, is to be an even bigger control freak. But the more people like Starmer tighten their grip, the more members are going to slip through his fingers. All eyes now will be on Rutherglen and Hamilton and Mid-Beds as far as by-elections go. Will Starmer end up screwing these up too, despite being promised a win perhaps? And if so, will he blame locals and try further takeovers of CLPs that way as well? Decent leaders don't do stuff like this. Dictators do. What do you reckon? Is Starmer right to seize control like this, or is it a sign of a panicking out of his depth man of too much ambition and too little talent? Let me know in the comments below and have your say, be part of the conversation. Thanks for watching. Hope you found the video useful. Please like, share and subscribe if you did. More content out daily. Meanwhile, here's a video recommendation for you. The latest events in Broxtowe, as I alluded to earlier in this video. See what he's been doing elsewhere, this Starmer chap, if you weren't aware. And I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.